week went by that I didn't hear the N-word directed at me or one of my black peers.
The taunting, "We're rich, we're white, we're Westlake," is still haunting.
I reported a guy for doing the Nazi salute. The administration took no action. Those are just 3 of more than 100 complaints of racism and discrimination shared by students from one of the most prestigious schools in Central Texas.
Westlake High School is well known for both its academic and athletic achievements, but KXAN uncovered a history of hurtful words and bad behaviors from students on campus.
Education reporter Alex Capriello found out how the school plans to ensure students of color are being heard and why these teenagers say they want more than just a promise for change.
There are more than 2,700 students who attend Westlake High School, and nearly 70% of them are white. I spoke to both current and former students who tell me that far too often they felt belittled, ridiculed, and trivialized as the minority. Now in 2020, with all eyes on race relations, they're sparking their own conversation on culture and color within the school. It started as an anonymous Instagram account. Have you experienced racism at Westlake? Send it in. Has someone targeted you or made you feel uncomfortable? Send it in.
I've been called the N-word probably every other day. N-word is just thrown at me like it's some sort of joke.
And I started really feeling bad about myself and who I was and my culture.
Some students posted videos they claim show their peers using racial slurs, like this one from last year.
For that one.
Others explained how their classmates would minimize their feelings.
People are told, oh, well, why can't you just take a joke, or why can't you just go with it like they didn't mean any harm? So they just don't really understand unless you're going through the experience.
Eanes ISD administrators are concerned an anonymous Instagram account doesn't really tell a full story. Instead, they're encouraging students to use the district-wide reporting system to share complaints. The state required all school districts to have one starting in 2017. Each time a report comes in, campus officials receive an alert and determine the best way to respond. In the 2 academic years since it was established, 269 reports have been submitted about Westlake High School, but the district says only 9 of them were categorized as racism.
Did you ever report any of the things that you saw or heard?
You know, we see those things and we're like, why? What's the point? Nothing's going to be done. Nothing's going to change. So there's no point in doing it.
We have a growth mindset. We always want to improve.
Superintendent Dr. Tom Leonard implemented this reporting tool. He wants more students to come forward so they can decide what action needs to be taken. But some district officials admit the system has flaws. There's no way to mark that an allegation has been verified as true and appropriate discipline has been handed out. And there are several options to choose from, but none classify a complaint as racism.
Do you feel like this is something that should have been done long before?
Do we have things to work on? Absolutely. Are we going to address them? Absolutely. But there's a lot of good in Westlake too, and I don't want that to be forgotten.
Some students of color tell us it's the normalization of these attitudes that ends up causing the most harm.
Yeah, that's the Westlake culture.
It was so racist there that that's just the culture.
So they want the administration to address it.
I don't think there's a culture of racism.
Still, Leonard has pledged to make things better. He established a diversity coordinator position in 2017. It's a designated teacher on campus responsible for connecting with students anytime they need guidance or want to share their feelings about what they're seeing and hearing. This coordinator also trains staff to confront bad behavior. More recently, the Eanes Board of Trustees hired an outside consultant to help staff address their own biases. Dr. Mark Gooden will help adapt current district policies to ensure equity among students.
We are going to take advantage of this moment in time. We are going to take advantage of this moment in time, and we can.
While the students appreciate these action steps, they say they want to see consistent discipline to hold their peers accountable.
I want to look back on Westlake and have it be somewhere that I was proud to be, but right now, I don't really think I can say that's the case, you know?
It's a very emotional game, and that doesn't give anybody the right, to be racist during that time.
Some students and alumni at Westlake High School say they are exhausted, fed up with what they call a culture of racism. Last night at 6 o'clock, we shared with you the emotional stories of more than a half dozen students who say school leaders are not doing enough to discipline their peers.
We told you districts are now required to have an online system for reporting complaints, but the system doesn't specifically track complaints of racism. And those complaints aren't just happening in the classroom.
KXAN education reporter Alex Capriello takes us inside the locker room of one of the more successful sports programs in Central Texas.
There are always a lot of high expectations for the Westlake High School football team. They're perennial contenders for the Texas State Championship. In fact, they even won it last year. However, despite that successful season, capped with a win at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, one star athlete tells me he wasn't always comfortable being there.
Touchdown, Chaparrals.
If you walk around Chaparral Stadium, you'll see athletes of the past. You'll notice they're all strikingly similar.
Being one of like the 3 black people on the team, you know, there's a lot of stuff said.
Zane Miners gets the carry straight up the gut.
Zane Miners, a senior at Westlake, is a key part of the Chaps offense.
Miners running left, sheds a tackle. Miners in the end zone. Touchdown, Westlake.
Despite the teammates surrounding him, he says he often feels alone. In the locker room and on the field, Miners says it's normal for some of his peers to use the N-word.
It's appalling that it's thrown around so casually.
Also on the field, other students, past and present, share their own feelings of hurt.
I didn't want to say anything because the entire band, they weren't going to listen to me or change that.
2 former members of the Westlake Marching Band and Color Guard recall a performance in 2014.
Westlake High School Band from Austin, Texas.
Remy Ogunsanya and Jules Shelby, both in the class of 2016, say they were asked to twirl colorful Confederate flags and perform to an old Southern song, which they say was chosen by the school with lyrics glorifying picking cotton.
I never really quite forgiven myself for being a part of that.
6 years later, the district says it regrets the decisions it made for that competition and apologized, saying it will work to make their performances more inclusive and respectful. Officials with the University Interscholastic League, which oversees high school sports and music at the competitive level, told me they don't have any reports of racism from anyone over the past 10 years at Westlake High. Students tell me they don't typically share their concerns with coaches or teachers because they don't think it will make a difference.
A lot of things get reported, and they're very serious things, in fact, and nothing seems to get done. And that's the problem.
The UIL used to provide schools a sportsmanship manual before each season, asking athletes to refrain from disrespectful conduct, like offensive remarks which insult others. Coaches had one too, pledging to stop anything that wouldn't reflect well on the school or the program. The UIL stopped distributing those manuals to schools years ago. Do you think Westlake High School puts as much emphasis on off-field behavior as it does on-field performance?
If we're going to have the expectation to do well in the classroom and in athletics, well, we should have that same expectation of how we're going to act and how we're going to present ourselves wherever we're at.
3 years ago, head basketball coach Robert Lucero was named Westlake's first ever diversity coordinator. He's Peruvian, which he says allows him to connect with other students and athletes of color if they're ever seeking help.
Students can feel comfortable reporting when something comes up, knowing that there's somebody like me on campus that they can come talk to directly.
In the 3 years he's had that title, Lucero says athletes have begun approaching him to share their concerns. But he wants to connect with the entire student body.
Athletics get glorified, and that's fine, but really it's more important that we take care of the people that aren't in athletics. Until I started to read and educate myself, I don't think I quite understood exactly all the different things that students can go through.
The district recently hired an outside consultant who will also help coaches, teachers, and staff become racially sensitive to student needs. As for Miners, he's already committed to playing football in college at Yale after graduation. But before he leaves, he hopes his story will give courage to other athletes of color who may also feel uneasy raising their voice.
With me being able to share this, they will actually realize that this stuff does happen to somebody that they know and somebody that they have been friends with, somebody that plays football. This happens in the Westlake community.
The UIL still has the power to enforce penalties against student athletes who are found in violation of the current athletic code. A local district executive committee made up of superintendents from across the area have the authority to deliver those punishments. That could include a suspension for up to 3 years from all practices and games. Now, during the course of this reporting, I've spoken to many people and uncovered other stories related to the treatment of students at Westlake High School. I'll be following up with the district to see how they're working with that consultant to actually address the current curriculum and school policies.